Well, hello there. I hope you're having a great day. This is, of course, David the Nerd Emperor, and as always, you are listening to, and if you're on YouTube for the live session we're experimenting right now, you are watching our first live podcast. Hold on, sorry. Had some glitches with the computer there. Trying to look something up. I'm having some issues with the software because I have the old and I can't really get things to work the way I want them to. So we're just going to try to make do and move along. But anyway, welcome to the War, Sports, Politics, and Dragons podcast. It is Season 1, Episode 34, and today's date is Monday, April 27th. 2026. I hope you had a good weekend. First, let's get the standard announcements out of the way. As always, you can follow us not just on Spotify, where we began, but here on YouTube as well, and Amazon, Audible, and iHeartRadio. Meanwhile, if you want to help us get better tech, pay the internet bill, etc., you can do it through Cash App and Venmo. Each handle is the same, WSPD Pod. We have a Patreon page for subscribers to sponsor us, and it's as cheap as $3 a month for some of the premium content. It's patreon.com/WSP Dragons. You can get freebies plus special extra content there, too, for, subscribers. So check it out. First 11 chapters of my first completed novel, Love's Crucible, are on there now. Chapter 11 just went up yesterday. The first chapter of that novel is available there for free, so you can get a taste. You can become a sponsor to read the rest as it comes out, and all my future works as they come out for as little as $3 a month. We're also announcing the creation, launch, whatever, of Rule Zero games, which is going to be our role-playing game aspect of things. Rule Zero will be the name under which our TTRPG products will be coming out in the near future. So again, just for $3, you can support a writer who's been writing his whole adult life. Literally, since I was 18 years old, 10 cents a day. That's not bad at all. And there are now 29. I actually spelled 20 wrong in the script. Wow. 29 novels in the pipeline. And they'll be coming out for years, basically. All for just $3 a month. 10 cents a day. And of course, you can also do super chats on here. I think they're set up. If not, no big deal. It's fine. But as this is the War, Sports, Politics, and Dragons podcast, we usually start with war. And this week, this Monday session, we're going to talk about the talks around I've been calling it the Third Gulf War since things began on February 28th. And I'm going to keep that name. The IRGC has walked away from the negotiating table, apparently. So I guess it's time to start pulling those scumbags up again. I don't know. But from the Institute for the Study of War, this came out last night, so it might be a little bit dated in light of the talks. But let's assume that they are going to come back to the negotiating table. We'll see. The ceasefire should be just about to expire, but I don't know. Let's see how things change, because it is a fluid situation, and there have already been violations, as I understand it, of the ceasefire. But moving forward with this, Iranian negotiators are reportedly attempting to secure an agreement that addresses the Strait of Hormuz. It's a Monday, guys, can you tell? And ends the war, but pushes nuclear talks to a later stage. Again, they're stalling so they can build a nuke, put it on an intermediate range missile, which, as I've already explained in the podcast, can reach as far as London, as far as Marrakesh, Morocco, could reach Singapore, could reach Moscow, could reach a lot of places. And that's their goal. They're not straying from their goal to destroy Israel and then eventually America as well. And then there's always the possibility of a backpack nuke or a dirty bomb. They want to continue to enrich uranium to make it weapons grade. And remember, when you get uranium enriched to 60%, it only takes 12 to 14 days to get it to 90, which is considered weapons grade. Okay, so it's not a far stretch. When you get to 60%, you're in basically the home stretch of uranium enrichment at that point. But anyway, they are reportedly attempting to secure an agreement that addresses the state, ends the war, but pushes nuclear talks to a later stage, as I just said. President Trump referred Saturday to a new, quote-unquote, Iranian offer that involves... I'm calling them the IRGC. I'm not calling them the Iranians, because from everything I've seen and read and heard, the Iranian people, by and large, do not support these guys. The IRGC represents less than 1% of the population of Iran, and they're holding them in a steel fist of a regime. So anyway, the offer involves them not having a nuclear weapon, but he stated, Trump did, that the offer was, quote, not enough, unquote. Iranian leaders, I'm reading from the script, Iranian leaders are reportedly divided about how they should approach any concessions on its nuclear program, which may explain the offer to push nuclear talks to a later stage. Well, duh. Divisions among Iran's political and military officials on their negotiating approach are not limited to just the nuclear issue, however. It's far from clear whether the reported new offer is the result of IRGC leaders unifying behind a distinct approach or proposal. IRGC Commander Major General Ahmad Vahidi and his inner circle. I wouldn't buy anybody in the inner circle a birthday card until the day of, just so you're clear, okay? Kind of like that comedian that did a bit about buying a birthday card for somebody who's 100 years old. Yeah, put that off till the last minute. Anyway, they've repeatedly blocked attempts by so-called pragmatist officials to push the regime toward a more flexible negotiating position. Yeah, that's because they're a bunch of hardline scumbags. Duh, part 2. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi will meet with Vladimir Putin in Russia after visits to Oman and Pakistan. Oh, great. So we're going to have Russia mediate this? That's going to end well. Yeah. Pragmatist officials like Araghchi and others may continue to advocate for a more flexible approach, but their efforts are unlikely to meaningfully shape Iranian decision-making in the near term without a shift in approach from Vahidi and his inner circle. Now, the Institute for the Study of War, I've read their stuff before and discussed some of it. They're supposed to put out an update, but it hasn't hit so far today. At the time I tape this, it's around lunchtime, East Coast, so it could happen later in the afternoon. It always feels like I do a podcast and then something big breaks during it or after it, and I'm not aware, especially when it happens like 12 minutes after I end a podcast. That's happened twice, that I've ended a podcast and had something big happen 15 minutes or less later. But moving on into other stuff, we're going to do our almost mandatory World War II story. This time we're going to talk about Pappy Boyington. This is from Untold War Stories on Twix. Goes by the handle of @UntoldWarFacts. He was 31 years old, commanding pilots a decade younger. They called him Pappy. They called themselves the Black Sheep. They shot down over 150 Japanese aircraft in less than 3 months. Then their leader vanished. This is the story of Gregory Pappy Boyington. Boyington was born on December 4th, 1912 in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. He grew up in Washington State. He wrestled and swam at the University of Washington. He graduated in 1934 with a degree in aeronautical engineering. Boyington wanted to be a Marine pilot. The Corps barred married men from flying, though. He had married young, so he changed his name back to a legal birth name he had not used in years and enlisted as a single man. He earned his wings in 1937. By 1941, though, he had resigned from the Marines to join Claire Chennault's Flying Tigers in China, where he claimed 6 kills against the Japanese over Burma. Okay, this shortens the story a little bit, and then says after Pearl Harbor, he rejoined the Marines. The thing about it is the AVG, or the Flying Tigers, the American Volunteer Group, didn't actually fly their first mission until after Pearl Harbor. So yes, technically that's correct in that he rejoined the Marines after Pearl Harbor, but he was still with the Flying Tigers for a short period after the Second World War, after I should say America was drawn into the Second World War with the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 41. There was also some talk at the time that now, he had some issues with, well, his finances were shot to pieces. He was a hard-drinking, hard-fighting SOB, as some people might have said. And he resigned his commission as a Marine Corps officer to join the AVG for a number of reasons. One was he might have been on the road to a court-martial for his behavior. 2 was to help his finances because the AVG, I believe, was paying $500 per Japanese plane shot down. And in 1941, that's a chunk of change. That's like $50,000 a pop now. So, you know, he still wanted to fight, though, and we weren't in the war, so there was a reason there as well. But there was some loose talk about possibly court-martialing him for abandoning his post, basically, by leaving the Marine Corps, but nothing ever came of it, and it may have just been some loose talk. I don't think anybody ever thought of filing formal charges against then Captain Boyington. But anyway, let's fast forward to August 1943 in the South Pacific. He was given command of a hastily assembled squadron of 27 pilots flying the F-4U Grumman Corsair. They were drawn from misfit reserves and replacement pilots. They had no real unit history. Boyington, at 31 years of age, was a decade older than most of them. They started calling him Pappy. Now, in my limited time in the Army, we had a guy in our little training unit who... I was 20 when I went in, and I was about mid-range of the ages of the guys. There was one guy named Chuck who was from Binghamton, New York. He actually looked like the character Joe Rockhead from the Flintstones. So when we weren't calling him Pop, we were calling him Joe. And either of the names really stuck. But he was a great guy. But anyway, when you're an older dude in the military, they tend to call you things like Pop or Dad or Pappy. So that totally tracks. That absolutely tracks there. They called themselves, though, the Black Sheep Squadron. The squadron was designated as VMF 214, the 214th Marine Fighter Squadron. Now, the V, by the way, is a designation for heavier than aircraft. So the A designation was a designation for lighter than aircraft. Read that. Sorry, I got to blow my nose. Read that as dirigibles, balloons. The U.S. Army had a few of them that they actually used on anti-submarine patrol early in the Second World War. I don't know how many of them made it through the war, but there was a lighter-than-air contingent in the Army Air Corps for a while. Anyway, that's not the Marines, that's the Army Air Corps. But moving along, the Black Sheep Squadron flew from Vella La Vella in the Solomon Islands, which is about halfway up the chain. It's about midway between Guadalcanal and Bougainville Island, which is in the northwest. From September 1943, they began one of the most aggressive combat tours of the entire Pacific War. In just over a month, Pappy alone shot down 14 Japanese fighters. The squadron destroyed pretty much everything that flew at them. In October, on the 17th of that month in 1943, Boyington led 24 Corsairs over the Japanese airfield at Kahili, which is on southern Bougainville Island. Many Japanese aircraft were on the ground. His pilots circled at altitude and dared the Japanese to come up. The Japanese took the bait. The Black Sheep lured them into the air and shot down a large number of enemy fighters with minimal losses of their own. Just so you know, the Corsair had a nickname, I think it was the Corsair, that had the nickname of Whistling Death in the Japanese military. It was a pretty feared aircraft, and our carriers had a good number of them on them. Of course, the primary carrier plane that the Navy used after the F-4 Wildcat was the F-6 Hellcat, which was designed basically as a Zero killer. The Japanese Zero was possibly the best airplane in the world, at least the best carrier aircraft in the world in 1941. And on June 4th, 1942, a pilot was shot down near Dutch Harbor, Alaska, and crashed his plane. He died. His name was Ensign Koga. The plane flipped over upside down, and it was found lying there in the permafrost a couple months later by a random American patrol aircraft. The plane was salvaged and then taken to the U.S. for basically research and reverse engineering so we could figure out what it was good at and what it was bad at and then design a plane around killing it. That's how the Hellcat came into being, the F-4 Corsair. Sorry, I digress a lot. I tend to ramble when I talk about stuff. But the F-6 Hellcat came out as a result of finding that Zero plane. The Corsair was a separate design, a gull-winged fighter plane with, I think, 650 calibers in the wings, 3 on each, and was very formidable aircraft. But anyway, around the same time, the Black Sheep made an offer to Major League Baseball players. Send us your team caps, and we will shoot down a Zero for every single one of them. So the St. Louis Cardinals, for instance, sent their caps, and the Black Sheep sent back kill markers. Fast forward to January 3rd, 1944, over the port of Rabaul, which is on the island of New Britain, about 250 miles north and west and slightly north of Bougainville, Boyington led a sweep over the Japanese stronghold. He had been closing in on Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I American record of 26 kills, but the strain was starting to tell on him a little bit. In the dogfight that followed, Pappy claimed 3 Japanese aircraft to make his total 28. His wingman, Captain George Ashman, was shot down and killed. Pappy bailed out of his burning Corsair with inches to spare during that fight. Japanese Zeros repeatedly strafed his life raft in the water. Somehow he survived. Hours later, a Japanese submarine surfaced beside him and pulled him aboard. The other pilots reported they had lost track of him in the fight. The search found nothing, so he was listed as MIA. In March 1944, so just 2 months later, President Roosevelt awarded then Major Gregory Boyington the Congressional Medal of Honor. They believed at the time it was posthumous, but Pappy was still alive. He was taken to Rabaul, where he was brutally interrogated, he was beaten, he was starved, and then transferred to camps in Truk, which is an island several hundred miles north of Rabaul, and it was a major Japanese anchorage until it was obliterated basically by air raids in 1944 and then bypassed and allowed to wither due to the supplies being cut off. But for 20 months, he was held in conditions that killed many of the prisoners around him. And here's this quick side note about that. Studies after the Second World War revealed that those who were held prisoner by the Germans, Allied prisoners of the Nazis, had about a 3% fatality rate when they were incarcerated in a German prison camp. The rate for Japanese prisoners, I believe, was something like 27%. So whereas out of a group of 30 American prisoners in a German a German prisoner camp, one might die. Of that same 30, 7 would die under Japanese auspices. So the Japanese were notoriously brutal toward prisoners because they didn't sign the Geneva Convention, and culturally surrender is not really a thing, or at least it wasn't to the Japanese at that point. They considered it incredibly dishonorable. You should fight to the death and die for the emperor, and that was the way they were taught and raised. They were taught to revere the emperor as a god. He was supposedly directly descended from the sun god, and because of that, you should die for your god in battle, and to be captured is a horrible dishonor. But moving forward, the Black Sheep had stopped flying as a unit just days after Boyington disappeared. But then on August 29th, 1945, American forces liberated his prison camp in Japan as part of the agreed-on occupation before the surrender, which took place 5 days later officially in Tokyo Harbor on board the USS, I believe it was the Missouri. Days earlier, his fellow prisoners had painted Pappy Boyington here on the roof of the camp. Pappy returned to American soil on September 12th, 1945. 21 of his original Black Sheep met him at the airfield. They threw him a party at the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco. Oh, whoa. I bet that was a humdinger. Life magazine covered it. I bet they did. President Truman personally represented the Medal of Honor to now Colonel Boyington. I believe he got promoted to colonel at that point. The medal had been waiting for him in Washington since the year before, retiring as a colonel in 1947. So, okay, I'm maybe wrong about when he got promoted, but in any event, he might have been a light colonel when he got back home and then a full colonel by the end of things. Retiring as a colonel in 1947, Boyington fought alcoholism and money problems for decades. He wrote his autobiography, Baba Black Sheep, which became a hit TV series in the 1970s. Anybody that remembers that series remembers Robert Conrad as the star. He later did a commercial for a battery company where he had the battery on his shoulder like it was a chip. The old chip on your shoulder means you're bearing a grudge and you're in a mood where you want to fight. So it was a very popular commercial, as I recall. Go ahead, knock it off, I dare you. That was the thing about that. Colonel Boyington died on January 11th, 1988 from lung cancer. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery next to the boxing champ, Joe Louis. So it's kind of appropriate that a fighter pilot would be right next to the Brown Bomber, because that was Joe Louis's nickname. But in any event, a friend at the funeral looked at the two graves and said, well, old Pappy wouldn't have to go far to find a good fight. So that's the story of Pappy Boyington. Ending the war segment of the show right now. Moving on to sports. how do I put this? I'm going to talk about the Baltimore Orioles real quick. Long-time Oriole fan. I've been bleeding black and orange since 1979. That was a bad year to pick them up, to be honest, because they lost the World Series to the Pirates that year in 7 games. After holding a 3-1 lead, and with games 5 and 6 at home, they still managed to crap it up and lose to Pittsburgh. But anyway, this year's Orioles are, I'm just going to go ahead and say it, they're officially done. They're done. They will not be contending for the postseason. And if I'm wrong, I will revisit this and apologize and congratulate them. But unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to be on. I think that the 17-1 loss Saturday to the Red Sox, followed by the 5-3, defeat yesterday against what was the worst team in the league when this 3-game series started. Their season's over. They're 13-15. Orioles are on pace to win about 76 games. So my original estimate of 88 and 74, I'm revising it downward to 77 and 85, and that's where I think that's going to end. I'd said this before, but I'm just going to go ahead and nail it in the wall now. They're done. They're absolutely done. You know, the biggest irony here is after Saturday's 16-run win, the Red Sox fired their manager, Cora, and several other coaches. The Orioles are so bad that other teams are losing their managers by osmosis even when they win, okay? I figure Baltimore will consider such a move in August if they're still playing like crap and not consistently winning. But odds are, I think they'll consider it in August, but I don't think they're going to do it. I think the current manager, Craig Albernaz, will keep his job for a year, maybe 2. But if they continue to stink, then they'll get rid of him at the end of the second year. Because Baltimore's upper management are not very fast at pulling the trigger on a manager firing. We've seen people linger before, and people in the front office like Sid Thrift also, who should have been gotten rid of years before their time ended with the team, have been kept. Sid Thrift he did some good things at first, but he just turned into an absolute clown as things went on with the Orioles. I can remember one call-in show where someone called to talk to Sid about a minor league prospect, and he named a name and said, yeah, he's a good guy. He's got talent. He can do this, he can do that, he can do the other, and so on and so forth. And the caller said, well, that's really interesting, Sid, because I just made that name up. So, I mean, that's the caliber of people that the Orioles have had in the front office over the years. So, I don't think things are going to improve for the Orioles. And I'm sad to say this because I am a longtime Orioles fan. They are my favorite team. And having met a number of the players over the years, either as a sports writer or as a fan or in other capacities, it's been rough talking to some of them in some of the years. But moving forward now, we're getting out of the sports segment, headed to politics, obviously. Going to talk about the big event Saturday night. An attempt was made on President Trump's life. This is the third one I can think of off the top of my head, starting in, July of 2024 in Butler, Pennsylvania, when he was literally hit by a bullet, and it took a piece out of his right ear. He was basically a turn of the head from having his brains blown out on live TV. But this time, a man attempted to run through the security cordon at the Washington Hilton Hotel to start taking shots with a pistol and a shotgun at Trump and other senior officials, according to his manifesto. I'm just going to go ahead and take someone at their word when they say they're going to kill somebody and then they try. The idiot's name is Cole Allen, and he ticks just about every box the liberals could have on a checklist of one of their prototypical brainwashed brood. 31-year-old millennial, liberal male, Kamala Harris donor. He bought all the left-wing talking points. Okay. This guy, heavily educated, got a bachelor's degree, got a master's from Caltech, heavily indoctrinated, proves the old adage about being educated to imbecility. And as I once said to a supervisor, I said, do you know what you get when you send a moron to college? You get a moron that can find the college. Education and intelligence do not automatically correlate. And the first thing I think when someone tries to wave their academic pedigree at me is they're compensating for the fact that they're actually an intellectual lightweight. They might have a little bit of knowledge in a specialized field in particular, but knowledge, practical experience, and intelligence are not the same things. they're 3 different breeds of horse. And you can sit in a cinder block dormitory and read books about other people doing crap all the time, but I'm still going to have a little bit more faith in people that have actually been out doing said crap. Call me crazy. But I mean, this guy bought all the lies that the drug runners from Venezuela that were being blown up by the Navy are actually just fishermen. Because as we all know, fishermen use speedboats now and don't carry nets or buoys to help find the nets or anything like that. They just get out there with weird looking barrels in their boat and haul it. And just do 60 or 70 knots across the water. Okay, Trump is a pedo because obviously Biden had that information from the Epstein files, but didn't bother to release any of it because reasons. Okay, yeah, okay, sure. ICE is raping women. And now that's a new one to me, but hey, if you're going to lie, you might as well lie big, right? So why not? And pretty much if you name the falsehood that's been spread by either the left or their compliant accomplices in the media, if you name the lie, this dude bought into it, and it was in his manifesto. Of course, he's written a manifesto, and the press is saying motives are unclear. Okay, sure, man. Sure, okay. I'm sure that down the road, though, we'll hear about his mental health struggles. I hope we do, to be honest, because what would concern me more would be that if he had none and he was a typical Democrat, because that would mean that the typical Democrat thinks the same way. I'd like to think that's not the case. I still want to believe that's not true, but it's becoming increasingly true with each passing day. So look, I've said for years that the only difference between a Muslim terrorist and a hardcore liberal Democrat is the hardcore liberal Democrat is afraid of guns. Well, some of them aren't. And every time we hear about a mass shooting, it's a reminder of that. Because it's not Republicans out there doing it, folks. It's not. If it was, you'd be able to compile a nice long list of it happening. I mean, you can make a big long list of Democrats that shoot people. But anyway, it's also used as fodder for gun control because, after all, when a gun is used in a crime, we put that gun in jail. I just want to know where the prison is where we put the guns that commit all the crimes. We never really addressed the root cause of it all, which is political brainwashing and people who are simply not right in the head. But, it's much easier to blame an object than to blame yourself for telling people that it's okay to kill people because they're Nazis and evil communist or fascist scum, But this is precisely how communist takeovers kind of begin, folks. There's political murder, rampant violence, rioting, and so on and so forth. If you don't think we're in the early stages of that, then yeah. But I would say the wildest part of this whole thing is that this happened at the White House Correspondents Association dinner. So you had a ballroom filled with alleged journalists, and none of them have bothered, to my knowledge, to give us a description of the guy. Could it be because he was white? Oh, that's right, he wasn't. Anyway, this guy, just typical, hardcore, brainwashed Democrat. Okay, militant atheist, incel, reports he was married to a woman from India turned out to be false. His arraignment is today. He's charged with 2 crimes so far. One being attacking a federal officer with a deadly weapon, the other using a firearm during commission of a crime of violence. Other charges might be pending, but as D.C. is a special federal district, this is a federal court matter, obviously. And to be honest, that to me is one more reason D.C. needs to be that way for good and not for this statehood nonsense to happen. The only reason Democrats care about wanting D.C. to be a state is because it votes primarily Democrat, and that would give them an extra Congress member and 2 extra senators. So, they don't care about representation. They only care about power. Whatever they have to say or do at the given moment to give themselves power to keep it just a little bit longer, they'll do it. And if it involves telling their minions to kill people and then their minions kill people, I abhor violence. Okay. What was that Hakeem Jeffries was saying about maximum warfare all the time, every day? I don't know. By the way, this did happen at the Washington Hilton, and that's the hotel where outside In March of 1981, John Hinckley shot President Ronald Reagan and came very close to killing him. If only there was a secure ballroom at, say, the White House, where there were built-in security enclaves and checkpoints and ways to filter people through an area to prevent anybody from just running recklessly through a defensive cordon to try to shoot at people. I mean, if only there was such a structure. Wouldn't that be nice? Of course, you're hearing the conspiracy theories abound now. This was staged. Okay. So the guy sat down and wrote a manifesto and took a train from Torrance, California, all the way to D.C. and checked himself into a hotel room for 3 days ahead of time, and all this was staged. And, well, I mean, it could be. Maybe the Southern Poverty Law Center had something to do with it. They're still on the hot seat, and let's not let them get off of it. Let's not forget about them. Their indictment revealed a pattern of paying people to stir up hate crimes, such as the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia in 2017. Woman was killed there when a car plowed into a crowd of people, as I recall. Turns out the SPLC helped organize the rally, according to court documents. So that's what they do. Okay, here's an example, a microcosm, an oversimplified perhaps version of it. Hey, here's $50. Go burn a cross in that guy's yard. Okay. So the guy goes and burns a cross, and SPLC gives him $50. Then the SPLC turns around to the donors and says, "Did you see the guy burning that cross? Did you see that? Give us some money and we'll fight that guy." That's pretty much what they're doing, and that's illegal. And we need to remember that. And you can excuse it and explain away all you want. They were just paying informants. So why do they create fake companies, which are fraudulent, give false statements to banks, which is also a crime? And then why are there chat logs of them organizing events? They're not paying informants. For one thing, they're not law enforcement. They're a 501c3 nonprofit, and it's not their job. And that's not how any of this works, guys. Come on. Think better, okay? Seriously. Don't just buy what your TV tells you. Come on. Seriously, man. But we're going to wrap up the politics portion and move on to Dungeons & Dragons, the Dragons portion of the podcast. And we're going into day 9 of the 30-day D&D challenge. And that question is, what is the favorite player character you would want to play? For me, that's very simple. There isn't one. I can make my own characters. That's the whole point of the game. I don't want to play someone else's character when I can make my own version that could well be better and more fun. Yeah, we've all wanted to play a Drizzt clone at one point or another, but actually, I've never actually played a Drow. I'm pretty by the book when it comes to character types, and I don't know. I've had plenty of fun playing the so-called core races and whatnot. I don't go terribly far afield, like playing a pixie thief or a minotaur assassin or any weird stuff like that. There are enough villains in the world that you can keep your 6 core races. You got your humans, elves, half-elves, dwarves, halflings, gnomes, and the occasional half-orc. They're cool. I mean, the heavy drinking paladin I played might be one of my favorites. Imagine those of you my age might remember the comedian Foster Brooks, who was on the Dean Martin show a number of times, among other places. Who let me see if I can do a Foster Brooks playing a paladin. I'm here to talk to you about the Lord Arperion and his ability to make your life better. What he can do for you is he is a servant of the light, and all that is holy and pure, and he will cast his gaze upon you and make your life better by giving you favor. Yeah, I don't do a great Foster Brooks, but that's essentially what he was like. He was inebriated a good deal, and it was fun to play that type of character. But That's going to move us on into anecdotal evidence and playing D&D, and about a movie that triggered us into playing D&D one night in 1987. Myself, my friend Rich, and our mutual friend Tim went to see the original Predator at the Dorset Cinema in Cambridge, Maryland, which is no longer open. Used to be on the, the 500 block of Race Street. We saw Predator that night, and while we were watching the movie, Rich looks at me and says, Dave, I've got an idea for a game. We're going to play D&D when we get back to your apartment. So we went back to the apartment Mom and I were living at. Mom had gone out for the evening doing her thing. It was a Saturday night, I believe. And we rolled up high-level characters, and we took on the Hunter. Outside a large walled city was a forested area that was also enclosed, wherein condemned criminals were sent to die at the hands of the Hunter, who was the official headsman, quote-unquote, of this city's government, and he took great delight and made a sport of killing the condemned. Well, we had gotten tasked with firing him because the government had changed. They were no longer doing that, and we had to go hunt down the Hunter and dispatch him because he had gotten wind of the change in government and decided to start killing city officials. So we went to fight the Hunter, and I was playing. Now, these were ridiculously high, overpowered characters, and it was first edition advanced D&D, so it was, my guy was a 14th level fighter, 7th level wizard, and a 13th level cleric or something like that. And Tim was playing something that was equally absurd in power. And, well, magic resistance worked a little bit differently in first edition than it did in third or fifth, as the way it worked was all magic resistance was based on an 11th level caster. So if you had 50% magic resistance, that meant that you were 50% resistant to any spell cast by an 11th level caster. For every level of differential, if you were a higher level or if they were a lower level or whatever, there was a 5% change in your magic resistance. Well, the Hunter had 90% magic resistance. So against my 7th level wizard, Rich topped it out at 99%. Because I was below that 11th level threshold, and thus there was a 20-point penalty. But he said, I'll give you a minimal chance that somehow something can get by, and you might be able to cast spells on him. Well, I burned up everything I had in the hopes of getting at him, and couldn't crack his spell resistance even using clerical spells, and finally said, to hell with this, and cast a cantrip called Belch. Okay, a cantrip was a 0-level spell, and what you would do is you would point at a subject and do that, and it would make the target belch. I rolled double zeros. I rolled 100 on the percentile dice, and the Hunter burped really loud. Really loud and offensive, the kind that would have gotten him thrown out of an official dinner somewhere. That was the only spell that worked. We ended up defeating the Hunter through conventional means. We ended up just pounding on him after a while. But, oh God, that was hilarious. That was absolutely hilarious. So, looks like we're going to come in a little bit under our normal 1 hour average time today. But time for a joke now. Be advised, I am trying to stop swearing. Okay, I did just say hell, but if you notice, no F-bombs, none of the big ones. But I'm still going to tell some absolutely horrific and often dirty jokes. Okay, and joke time is upon us. So here we go. You ready? All right. What's red, white, and black and has a terribly difficult time negotiating its way through a revolving door? The answer? A nun with a spear through her neck. Remember, you were warned. Final thought for the day. We are, I think, already in a civil war. It's on a slow boil, and right now only one side is firing shots. Honestly, Charlie Kirk's assassination to me was the Fort Sumter moment of the Second American Civil War. It's taking Republicans a little while longer to understand and accept it. because we have so many spineless people in the party that they just want to go along to get along, because being in power, even as the minority party on Capitol Hill, is much more alluring to them than actually saving the country. But one side does not want peace, I can tell you that. And when someone tells you who they are, and they show you who they are over Butler, Pennsylvania, and over Mar-a-Lago, and over Washington Hilton Hotel, believe them. Okay? Believe them. But anyway, make sure to follow the show on Twitter. The handle is at the WSPD Podcast. More stuff is coming on the Patreon page. As I've said before, there's just not enough time in the day. You can help sponsor us through our Patreon page. It is patreon.com/WSPDragons. You can join us there. Sponsorships start at just $3 a month. You can also help us upgrade our equipment and pay our operating costs via Cash App and Venmo, as in Internet and Electric, among others, and to get some good mapping software, because right now what I have is not to my satisfaction for making modules for TTRPG PG stuff for loans or Rule Zero games. But anyway, at Cash App and Venmo, the handle is WSPD Pod. As always, you can hear us on Spotify, where we began, so please follow us there, as well as here on YouTube and on iHeartRadio, Audible, and Amazon. So thanks for your time. This is Dave the Nerd Emperor signing off. Hope you had a great day watching me from this dingy spare bedroom in our home. Have a great Monday. Have a great rest of your week. The members only Patreon Live is on Wednesday, and we'll have another podcast on Friday. Going to be doing YouTube Lives and Twitter Spaces as well, and putting out some written stuff. So again, check out the Patreon site, patreon.com/WSPDragons. Read the first chapter of Love's Crucible, get a feel for the main character, and understand he's about to go through some stuff. And consider subscribing for 10 cents a day. You can read new work. But anyway, thanks again for everything. Take care. Have a great rest of your week, and we will talk again on Friday.